with our southern counterparts, Surge. And I'll quickly introduce our co-chairs for the Sustainable Cities Network Green Infrastructure Work Group, and then we'll hand it over to Nicole to uh, introduce the Surge group. So Tim and Jesse. So Tim Connor is with the City of Scottsdale, and Jesse Westad, who's with Urban Work Design, are our co-chairs for our Green Infrastructure Work Group. So welcome. And Nicole?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. My name is Nicole K. Spear. I am the chair for Surge in Tucson. Formerly our kind of southern section low impact development working group. We recently decided to rename and rebrand, so we're the Sonoran Urban Resilience and Green Infrastructure Exchange, as Anne mentioned, and I'm joined today by Mead Meyer and Matthew Lutheran, who are my two main peeps supporting our efforts, and we have a few of our past steering committee members here too. So Irene, I think I saw you out there. And yeah, those are the folks on our leadership team right now. Did you want me to jump into Surge updates right now?
Yeah, I was going to just mention a couple of the housekeeping items. And so just it's the usual Zoom reminders, essentially. So just keep yourself on mute if you can, just to minimize disruptions. We will be recording the presentation and then sharing that out within a couple of days. So if you missed something, rest assured we'll follow up, and we'll also get the PowerPoint slides from the Tucson Clean and Beautiful folks to share those. And if you're just joining, please put your name, title, and organization in the chat, because we'd love to keep track of you all. And then for our agenda today, we'll be doing the presentation first, which is Cultivating Climate Leaders in Tucson, Arizona, which we're very excited to hear about workforce development. And yeah, then we will take question and answer at the end of that, and then we'll leave some time, hopefully, for community updates between Central and Southern Arizona organizations and communities. So fingers crossed. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't as well. And then just an acknowledgement. I'm going to post our land acknowledgement statements in the chat. I don't have my slide handy, but we do want to, I'm going to let somebody in. We do want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather and engage in this work is the ancestral homeland of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land for generations. And so we acknowledge and honor our 22 native tribes and tribal nations and that have been here for centuries and whose presence has shaped this region. We strive to build sustainable and equitable communities. We must also reflect on their histories and cultures of the native peoples who have nurtured the land. So we want to acknowledge them, but also welcome their participation in all of our discussions and activities. And so with that, Nicole, if you want to go ahead and introduce Surge, that would be great.
All right, thanks. And I'll throw a PDF up here to help get you guys oriented to everything Surge here. So we've updated our purpose and priorities statement here. So we're our new I guess description of our activities is that we're a peer learning network that fosters knowledge sharing, co-develops tools and strategies, drives collaborative action to advance stormwater innovation and community resilience across our region. So we're really focused right now as a group on action-based and member-led initiatives. So more kind of on the ground. We've all been doing this for so long now. how do we really focus in on what are the tools and resources that practitioners kind of on the front lines of green infrastructure need right now to support them in their work. We did a survey and our network told us that these are their priorities right now. So these are our goals in 2025 and beyond for the moment until we reassess. So policy and planning, cross-sector collaboration, community resilience and equity, climate resilient design, communicating nature-based solutions and benefits, workforce development, hence our wonderful speakers we have here today. And then specifically, how do we care for and steward these through a regenerative and maintenance, a regenerative centered framework for maintenance. We've also restructured our group a bit. So in addition to our speaker series, we now have what we're calling focus groups. So we meet on the third Thursday of every month from 1:30 to 3. And every other month, we're either hosting a speaker series, which we're co-hosting with Anne and the wonderful SCN GI work group today. And next month, we'll be hosting a focus group. So our focus groups are kind of peer-driven. They're smaller groups. They're meant to provide an environment where professionals can interface a little bit more intimately and directly on specific projects or problems that they're working on right now. Last month's focus group was a GSI GIS data resources roundtable. So we had a bunch of folks gather and share about their data projects and their favorite tools that they use in green infrastructure planning and development. And next month, we'll be doing a community engagement roundtable. So inviting everyone in who wants to have a conversation about how to equitably engage communities in the development of green infrastructure. And in terms of getting involved, if you're not on our listserv, you can, if you want to drop your name in the chat and just say, hey, Nicole, add me to the Surge listserv, I can get you added to our network. We also have a focus group request form. I'll drop that link in the chat here as well shortly, but basically we're member-led and member-driven. So if you have an idea or a need for collaborators, feedback, projects that you're stumped on, maybe you just want to share how you're feeling as a GSI practitioner in this world, in this moment, our focus groups are here to support you in that. So submit a form if you have an idea. And then as always, we're open to inviting folks into our steering committee. So if you're interested in a leadership position, you can also reach out to me about that as well. So next month, we'll be meeting on Thursday, June 19th at 1:30. So sign up for the listserv or get in touch if you're interested in joining a conversation on community engagement and equity. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to Anne. Or are we moving right into speaker intros?
Yeah, well, I was going to just mention our next for the Green Infrastructure Work Group for Sustainable Cities Network. The next meeting is scheduled for June 10th. So we're still working on our topic presentation just to confirm that, but just putting that date out for the Phoenix and Valley folks as well. So more details to come on that. And it is one of 7 work groups that the Sustainable Cities Network hosts on an ongoing basis. We'll meet in June, take a break over July, and then start back up in August, just so everybody knows. And I do love all the changes you've made to Surge. I think that might be something for us to revisit as well on our work group, simply for the fact that the summer is always a good time to kind of reflect and see if we need to make changes to our topics and work group structure as well. So good job to that. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you so you can introduce our presenters.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anne. So we are so lucky to have the fabulous Sasha Timpson and Angelantonio Enriquez Breault with us today. They work for Tucson Clean and Beautiful, managing their climate equity um, and resilience workforce programs. They'll tell you about those efforts today, but a little bit about Sasha. Sasha uses they, them pronouns. They are the Rainworks Maintenance Program Coordinator for TCB. And Sasha is a beautiful human. They are very experienced with building deep trust-based collaborations in communities around environmental stewardship projects. Sasha has a very hands-on approach with a deep passion for people and plants and thrives doing work at the intersection of ecological care and community resilience. Sasha has a diverse background that includes work in community gardens, farming, landscaping, and community herbalism, and is very invested in cultivating reciprocal relationships between land and people. And Angel uses he, him pronouns and is the Climate Equity Workforce and Education Director for TCB. Angel's a fourth generation Tucsonan and feels privileged to be rooted in an ecologically and culturally diverse part of the world. Angel is invested in creating a sense of place, a reciprocal relationship with the natural world, advancing storytelling and other concepts that guide reconciliation with natural systems. Angel's background includes managing environmental programs, designing curriculum, and overseeing grants for organizations like the Desert Museum, Ironwood Tree Experience, National Park Service, the Wilderness Society, Arizona Trail Association, and the Association for Environmental Educators. So a lot of rich knowledge and experience and deep passion for cultivating climate leaders. And I'll let them take it away. Thank you both.
Thanks, Nicole. And thanks everyone for being here. We've met a lot of y'all before, and there's a lot of new faces. Some of you have heard variations of this presentation in the 2 years that these programs have been under development. But again, yeah, today we're here to speak about workforce development and specifically looking through the lens of landscape professionals and this cooperative pre-employment model that we have been implementing over the last couple of years through a couple different funding sources with these partners that we see on the screen. We're going to talk a lot about that today, but I think just prefacing our presentation, we're really talking about a person first and community and place-based model for how can we, as the individuals that are most invested in the upkeep of our urban ecosystems and the integration of biodiversity and the wellness of our communities, how can we center employment and the people that we're employing in that process? And now it's to see if the slide transitions work. Okay, cool. I think so. Yeah.
Nope, actually put your cursor maybe on your, there you go.
Rock and roll. Okay, there we are.
Awesome. Yes, thanks so much for the intro. Thanks for inviting us. I'm Sasha, and I don't even think we really need to go over our bios since Nicole did such a fabulous job introducing us. I gotta call Nicole every time I need an intro. And I think that I just feel really privileged to be in this space with all of you. Some of you I know, many of you I don't, but it seems like we have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and experience in this room. And just want to take a moment to just carry through that land acknowledgement as an invitation for me, especially as a white settler on this land, to remember, how many people are still unlinked from their homelands right now and being actively genocided on their homelands. And as people who really are stewards of the land and who really care for environmental restoration, transformation, let that be a continual invitation for us all to continue that work. So I will stop on this slide here. Let me just work my own slides as well. Okay. So I just wanted to introduce kind of broad strokes what we've been up to at Tucson Clean and Beautiful. Angel and I have been shaping a workforce program here, which extends beyond these two programs on the screen. And it actually starts at the age of 13 when we invite folks from the community to come in and learn a little bit more about urban forestry and the ecology of our Sonoran Desert. Introduce them to watershed and ecological concepts, and have them engage in community through volunteering, through partnerships with other folks who are leaders in their own right. And then it's been kind of forming itself into a pathway where then some of our people who graduate from those programs, or some of people who are fresh out of high school turning 18 and are looking for pathways into careers and into learning new skills, and the trades are wondering what's next for them. And so this has really come out of that place for us. And so we have had the privilege of running two extensive workforce programs right now that center in the landscape industry. And the first one was called, they all have different titles depending on the funders. But the first one was called Climate Equity Workforce Leaders, COOL for short. And our most recent one that we were able to put on this fall was the Arizona Arboriculture Pre-Employment Program, AAPP for short. And so that's the one that I was involved with. That's one we're going to be focusing on as our most recent case study of what we've been up to. And then to the side of those pictures is the funders who helped fund these programs, made them possible.
So building on that, these two programs that we have had the privilege of working in and collaborating on have built upon the principles and kind of the strategies and tactics you see outlined here. A brief overview of the AAPP program. What we have been working on this last run was a full-time pre-employment program. So we were able to run a 8-week long pre-employment program that connected people through experiences in green storm infrastructure maintenance, in arboriculture, in tree climbing, in botany and taxonomy, in engaging in kind of environmental and cultural place-based history, but also engaging in life skills. So a lot of these individuals that we've been working with, they fall into this demographic of 18 to 26, and some of our participants really fall up into that 30-year-old area as well. The primary employment age gap, as outlined by the federal government, is really between 25 and 55 years old. And as we know, there's a lot of difference between where a 25-year-old and a 55-year-old are at in their lives. And so this program really was put together with those folks that are in that early career journey in mind. We're really looking at those 18 to 26-year-olds, those that have maybe found themselves outside of a traditional 4-year academic track, but are still interested in doing things that are stimulating, that they're learning in, and that also give them a sense of belonging and place, which is an overwhelming thing that we've heard from participants. This is an age group that really, coupling all these things that we see here, wraparound services with technical training in green storm infrastructure, but also with kind of the social skills, the really they say soft skills, which I think is an awful name for interpersonal skills, but really looking at how do we work within a community, because that's what we are doing regardless of whether we are designers or people on the ground doing installs or maintenance. So this was an 8-week program of full intensive, 32 hours a week, experiences in the field, curriculum, learning, assessments, and then at the end of that 8-week program, full-time employment, we were able and really grateful to be able to place half of our participants at various different partners that then hosted them for another 2 months of full-time employment. And so those placements, we will talk about where our pathways are, where we kind of recruit from and where people have ended up, and the type of partnerships that we created and what we've seen successful. But that really does range from all of the individuals that are here right now. So if you are a municipality, if you are a county government, if you are a private landscaping organization or company, these are all places where these participants can end up. And again, another thing I really want to mention before we move on is that the two things that make this program work really well is it is a person first and a place first program. We really center on where we are, the communities we're in, the issues in the environmental context of the land we're interacting on, and really putting a person-first approach. So that means not just with our participants, but also the contractors and the educators that we invited into this experience.
Yeah, so our intentions for this program, as Angel just named a few of them, really, like, we both are very much coming from a perspective that we are a product of the culture that shapes us. And so I don't know how many of you all have been on a landscaping crew before and experienced the culture of a landscape crew or something that's a little bit more hard skills, trades focused. But what I've witnessed in my own understanding is there tends to be a certain type of person who really fits the mold of being able to belong in those crews. There's a high turnover. There's sometimes, even though it's not stated or how it's supposed to be, there can be a lack of safety or regard for the actual individual in those positions. And so it really promotes this culture of disposability, and actually doesn't always privilege the knowledge that people are coming from. A lot of people who want to get into land care practices and stewardship already have a great deal of knowledge behind them, whether it be from, you know, learning from their parents or community or their own personal exploration. And so we also really wanted to meet people where they're at and highlight the knowledge we already hold, because we're all holding different levels of knowledge. And also, I think that both Angel and I believe as educators that when we get good educators, we also become really good educators. And so it's not only the how and the technique of how we do things, but also how we're teaching really promotes other people to get excited about sharing that knowledge and creating more of a standard and ethic quality of care for urban forestry and our other green industries that then gets promoted across the field and becomes the standard over time. So in shaping this program, we were able to work with, as Angel said, a group of 10 folks, young folks in the community, who really get primed to enter into the industry and expect that they're going to be treated as, you know, worthy individuals who are, you know, coming in with skills, even if they are coming into an entry-level position, but they know their worth. And so we really wanted to promote a culture of collaboration. We wanted to work with partners in the community who might have a lot more time and experience in the field, but also have been privileged enough to be in the positions where they had mentors who really cared about them and cared about instilling that knowledge, and then be able to link them to other young people who are in the same position. We also believe that you can do that at the same time that you are teaching best practices in the industry, and also ask questions about why. Why is that the industry approach, right? Why is that known as the best? Are there other ways? Are there ways to be curious that can help lead to innovative practices? And then, like Angel named, we really wanted to take a whole human approach. So working on personal and professional development. You might be 18 and super eager to get a job on a tree crew, but if you can't figure out how to prep your own food and figure out how to get a bank account, it might not get you far. And those might be the hangups that actually prevent you from being able to succeed in this industry.
Yeah, and this again is just kind of looking at those 2 8-week portions of the program. You know, this just lays it out. We really have that recruitment window where, again, we'll talk about kind of partners and the on ramps for this type of experience, what we've seen, and I know that there's plenty more that you may be thinking of. We kind of divide this up too around these curriculum blocks, really looking at this whole person approach, like Sasha just reiterated. You know, again, I will dive into that more, but that is such an important piece of before we start training the concepts of the how, it's like the what and the who. Who are you? What is going on? Where are you? And just establishing, orienteering that. It's a big piece of it. Then moving into those applied concepts with context established, now being able to learn that in a skills-based capacity, in a community centered way. Then we have our end of graduation, you know, our graduation and placements. That's kind of the ceremonial piece and this offboarding for some folks. But then also, you know, a new chapter for everyone, especially those 5 half-hour participants that were able to do their internships with the professional entities afterwards. So that was a really, really great flow. And we know there's a lot of other ways to run this kind of program, but what really made this effective was being a full-time 32 hours a week program. We had done it in years past with Cool, where we extended it as part-time for 6 months. But attrition's really real. If you have a part-time job and you're 18 and other things are popping up, you know, your thoughts can change and your life goals can change the drop of a hat. So, you know, we all know young people like that who have decided they want to pick up and move to a completely different thing. And I think that this consolidated and more full-time immersive experience allowed for a lot of folks that otherwise may have dropped out over time to really fully just be in this and with community in place and context and really apply things 100% presently.
So this is just a slide that showcases some of the actual topics we covered that have to pertain with, or that pertain to urban forestry. There's Simon up in a tree, and tree climbing was a week-long portion of the program. I don't know how many of you all do tree work or have had the privilege of being able to get in a harness and climb trees. But this is, you know, not only great for advancing as a professional in this line of work, but a lot of people never get to do this, even if they're excited about it, right? There's so many cost prohibitive parts to it, the gear being one, the training, the safety. And then also, I think, you know, I will always come back to some people feel like this is more for them than others. And so giving everyone a chance to hop in the harness, to climb a tree, to see that they actually can get up there and might have some really amazing skills was a huge part of this program all around. As you can see, we covered everything from soil health to getting in the tree to safety the whole way through, identifying potential career options. Angel will get into this a little bit, but we introduced them to so many people in the industry around Tucson and the greater area who have had career paths that take many twists and turns for them. We talked about invasive species that we might see, you know, and removal practices for them. We talked about botany, plant identification, plant adaptations that pertain to our Sonoran Desert ecosystem. And so again, really hitting upon why and how that informs the how.
Only other thing I want to add there is I love this picture of Simon, and I really want to just drive this point home is like, because this is a skills and experience based process, it's like not everyone is going to end up being a tree climbing arborist, but the benefits and the passive benefits of and learning experiences like this can build so much more confidence. Like you look at that face, you look at Simon and how he's smiling. And I think that this is just a thing that we're not going to really talk about a lot today, but there's so many unquantifiable metrics of growth that happen throughout these experiences and this kind of structure. We watched folks that, you know, never would have opened up or been confident enough to do this kind of thing really step out, and they may never work in arboriculture, but they have this moment that you're looking at right there, which means a lot more to the peoples in the picture than it does us. There's more of those pictures too.
Yeah, these just highlight a little bit of, you know, some of the group activities we did. That lower left there is we took everybody to Madera Canyon and the Santa Rita Mountains. Talked a lot about Sky Island's watershed ecology. A lot of plant identification. I mean, folks walked into our program not knowing a grass from a vine and walked away, you know, knowing scientific nomenclature of many different plants in Tucson. Gardening, we had fruit tree pruning there is highlighted. They learned how to use different machinery like the chipper up there in the top right, working with certified arborists in town on the job to do clearance pruning and things of that nature.
So again, these are just some of the kind of broader modules that we were using as touchstones throughout the program to really drive home skills and drive home concepts. And it's like the pictures you saw, all the things that Sasha just mentioned. I think we really did, again, all of this was brought through a very place-based and community-based perspective. So when we're talking about ecological restoration, we're looking at that from a holistic lens and a biocultural lens of what has happened to this landscape, what has happened to our watershed, how have the effects of, you know, industrialization, settler colonialism, and urbanization impacted and led us to the legacies that we're trying to work through. Again, not just the how to do this stuff, but the whys, right? Why are we in this situation? What led us here so that we can be informed practitioners. You know, maintenance obviously is a huge piece. Taxonomy was a huge piece. Knowing our community in a sense of not just our human community, but the plants that we're working with, the ecosystem beneficiaries that are connected to these plants, the pollinators that show up. All of this makes a not just more informed and more you know, connected individual, but they also makes them excited, and it makes you excited when you're able to recognize, you know, the glow mallow popping up on the corner that you've called a weed your whole life. So again, all of this, these worksite prep, all this was very rooted in people in the context of really, you know, our Sonoran Desert and our Santa Cruz River watershed here. And it looked like this. So this is like a little bit of a logic map to show you how we mapped out this pathway. And what you see on the left side of the screen here is kind of our onboarding and our recruitment pathways through this program. We worked with really 3 primary on-ramps. One of our great partners over the last couple of years has been Youth on Their Own. As some of you may know, Youth on Their Own provides services to young folks that are under 18 experiencing homelessness or near homelessness. They provide stipended programmings for them to continue their education. And unfortunately, they have amazing alumni that services drop off after 18. And so a lot of young folks, some of our most successful candidates have been from this demographic of young adults that are in very vulnerable situations that are looking for something that is exciting, connected to nature, connected to Tucson, that brings them into this space. We've also worked bridging kind of new arrival populations as well. Some of our participants have come from organizations like Ishkashida, alumni, or the IRC, and then as well as local kind of workforce readiness programs. I know those of you down here in Pima County are very aware of Pima County One Stop, Youth One Stop, which is focused again at the same demographics that we're looking at, which is really 18 to 26. We had a couple that found out from that, as well as other groups like school foundations have been supportive. So these are on-ramps. But what's really exciting, I think, and what everyone thinks about is this middle part, the greens and the blues. You can see there's kind of 2 buckets of skills. We have our technical applied skills, and we have our life and interpersonal skills, our hard skills and our soft skills, if you want to be that reductionary. But here we are with our technical skills, and you can really see where concepts connect to people and place, right? So we worked with all of these individuals up here, and some of these groups, like Hood Arborist, our friend and ISA certified arborist Pedro Perez, and some of our Greenstorm infrastructure practitioners like Emma Stalwart. You know, these are folks that are on the ground working as practitioners, right? That are being contracted by municipal and county services, and also residential commercial services. We worked with city groups. We worked with departments. You can see Pima County there. You can see the city of Tucson Storm to Shade. We worked with some folks on the call here. Nicole Gillette, our urban forester for Tucson, actually helped us connect and do a tree removal, right? So by connecting with these different groups, we were able to address maybe capacity concerns and projects that were actively happening in our urban ecosystem, but we were also able to connect with these individuals in the environment that's most relevant to their work, right? The places that they're doing the work, the landscapes that they're engaged in. And so we were able to bring concepts that really maybe aren't as accessible to folks that don't have a scientific background, like soil science and taxonomy. We were able to bring that into a far more accessible environment because we were working with people that were connected to place and people that were able to pull on examples of the landscape around them to drive home the points they were trying to make, right? And so that was a really fun piece of this, where we see these technical skills that Sasha mentioned and that we looked at earlier in our arboriculture. They're integrated across these various different relationships and locations. Same with our kind of interpersonal and life skills, right? Really looking at things from CPR and wellness, right? Financial wellness. We have Vantage West come in and talk about savings and budgeting, right? Because this is the first time some folks have ever opened a bank account. We talk about nonviolent communication. We talk about how to find a transit route, you know, and how do you get from point A to point B if you don't have your car or your bike has a flat, right? These are all life skills that a lot of employers do not give their folks training in, and therefore lose really, really great candidates along the way because they're not providing these gaps in services that we were able to integrate into this program, right? So I really want to drive home, you know, we want our folks to be able to climb trees safely and set up a removal site and a drop zone, you know, and we also want our folks that were entering this workforce to be able to have like a compassionate and informed conversation without blowing up a team morale or team etiquette, right? I think there's a lot of skills that we can bring together, both in the soft and the hard, into the context of the field that we really balanced well in this program. And we didn't balance it because Sasha and I are like phenomenal facilitators and connect all the dots every time we are, but we did it because the community we were participating with was able to reinforce these concepts and these standards as a collective, rather than just one person dropping in and saying, okay, I'm teaching you this and I'll see you never, right? All of these folks were able to plug back in some way, shape, or form throughout the program. And then again, it plugs in really with the placement. Where do we off-ramp folks from these kind of pressure, what I call pressure cooker experiences, right? They go in for 8 weeks full time, and where do they go after that? What we found was kind of a really interesting blend of placements in kind of 3 groups. One, we have smaller groups, smaller practitioners, right? And larger practitioners. These are our private for-profit landscape managers that are either just starting up smaller crews, but also our mid-sized crews, where we have several folks working right now. I'll touch on that in a second. Another group is nonprofits, right? CBOs. There's obviously a lot of things that we overlap on. Municipalities and nonprofits. And I think that the way that we can look at this as a community effort and more of a decentralized effort is recognizing really the flow of our personnel, you know, folks that end up at a nonprofit. And I met Nicole here from TCB, right? So I think we need to be honest about the relationships we hold and how our relationships are not just these institutions, right? And I think that was what was really awesome is we connected with Ben Tully and Celeste Gamble over at Smartscape Cooperative Extension, who helped teach us about soil. And they were able to plug in one of our placements to help with things they needed capacity with. We had folks that learned all these skills in community engagement, right? And nonviolent communication and facilitation. And so we had a perfect candidate to go in and help them run their Master Gardener program, which is all about dealing with community members who are love plants, but are also maybe retired and a little bit more particular and need an extra person-informed facilitator to manage that, right? By finding these needs within our kind of groups of these nonprofits, our entities and institutions like the U of A, but also groups like Pima County. Another one of our great placements this year was at Pima County in Conservation Lands and Resources. We had one of our interns, Alex Huerta, over there, and they had an amazing experience and it was awesome. Every single person that they got to work with, they learned something from. But what was more exciting is talking with Brian Powell, Director of Conservation Lands and Resources for Pima County, was that every person Alex got to work with was so excited about the perspective and the knowledge that they brought into those spaces as well. I think one of the overwhelming surprises with this kind of model was all of these folks on this internship placement partner side. We have a huge gratitude to them because they signed up for something that we experimented. We tried to place an intern with them. And I think a lot of times we are inclined to say no because we know as administrators collectively that people management is hard and takes a lot of time. But what we have found is that when we integrate our community and shared standards and are a part of that shared training throughout that middle process, that onboarding and that handoff is way, way smoother because we have a shared culture that has been discussed throughout the entire flow, right? Not just being like, hey, congrats, take what you learn into this brand new space. But no, Brian Powell, Celeste Gamble from Smartscape, Ben Tully with Smartscape, and Emma, you know, all these folks came in and they interviewed the students as part of a skills training workshop. They gave them feedback on their interviews, right? They were a part of that very intimately. And then they were able to take them on as their workforce apprentice, right? Or intern. These are the folks that we were able to engage with throughout that. You can see again, this real blend of community-based organization, small, private, and middle-sized practitioners, as well as government agencies and entities, right? That is what made this work, that sweet intersection and tri-support of public, administrative, we have public community organizations, as well as this private sector blend. Finally, and then I'll hand to Sasha because I've been yapping for a minute here, but I wanted to touch on this kind of soft skills piece, quote unquote soft skills there. When I talk about our kind of whole person development, we use this kind of wellness wheel framework, which some of you may be familiar with. It's well adopted across various different industries. But looking at ourselves as holistic beings, right, as folks that have needs occupationally, intellectually, financially, emotionally, socially, physically, right? And as we do these trainings, really bringing in partners to help, not just partners that are experts in these, like we had our kids, they got to do a lot of cool fitness. They got paid to work out, you know, in the context of maintaining their bodies for tree care and GSI work. That's awesome. They got paid to do yoga and meditation, right, to learn how to be mindful and practice mindfulness and have the skills to do that outside of the program. All of those are things that I wanted to touch on because I think they get shoved under the rug as wraparound services, but there are things that we know directly impacted the learning experience and the synthesization of the knowledge they were learning because they were actively integrating these wellness practices as well. I think that that's a big thing that I cannot emphasize enough, that our partners really did embody as well. We asked our partners, whether they were county or nonprofit or private, to talk about their own wellness and their own career journey and experience so that we could have subjective context for what this means as professionals, rather than just saying, make sure you pack a lunch and make sure you show up on time.
Yeah, so as Angel highlighted, we've had a lot of program successes. I think we appreciated the quality of the program overall, and so did everyone who graduated from it. But in terms of some maybe more quantitative metrics we can look at, so like Angel said, we were able to graduate 5 graduates, or everybody graduated, but 5 were able to move to being employed through the internship process. To be clear, we would have, all 10 would have qualified for that, but the grant parameters only allowed 5 in their funding. All 10 of them were able to be paid throughout this entire time, which I think is really huge. Paid training is something I always advocate for. Like Angel just highlighted, we had many instructors who came through, which bridged relationships with which those people still have now. Over 10 of them were ISA certified instructors as well. Each student had over $3,000 in combined, like with all the PPE they were given, all of the certifications they got. OSHA certification was one of them. The ANSI safety certification was another. And also, while they did not get their arborist certifications through this program because of a timing parameter that has to be reached, they all are very much on their way at this point and have a lot of training that comes directly from the training guide for that test.
Shout out to one of them that just did become a certified arborist.
Yeah, that's true. They also helped out plant over 130 trees throughout those 2 months while they were in the program as well. And that's Alice rocking a chainsaw.
Yeah.
And then these are just our, I know we've talked about them a little bit. I won't go into detail on any of these folks, but these are the 5 graduates who then were placed into internships. 4 out of 5 of them are in full-time work now with tree care, tree and GSI care. So definitely consider that a success. One of them is going off and doing more training for schooling, and it's going to be maybe flying planes, but maybe, you know, who knows, fighting forest fires in planes. We'll see what happens. But yes, we're really proud of all of these folks, and we see them around town. They are now our collaborators and hopefully future employers for more graduates of this program.
They're awesome people if you see any of these folks around Tucson. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. I think that we could talk about the successes all day long. There could be like 5 more presentations on just like the wins. But the challenges, I think, are the thing that we have all been kind of avoiding conversations on collectively around workforce development. So here they are. One of the big things that we have found ourselves dealing with is a misrepresentation of what landscape professionals are. Just for context, arboriculture and green stormwater infrastructure currently do not fall within any specific Workforce Opportunity and Investment Act funding. WIA funding, which is federal money. We cannot get any of that because we do not fall within the sectors of energy, construction, or landscaping entirely. Landscaping is its own industry that does have funding from WIA, but standards like tree care standards and the types of standards that Storm to Shade is integrating into their stormwater maintenance, those are not enforced by WIA programming. And so we're kind of at this interesting intersection of nature-based restorative economics. We are teaching practitioners to participate in nature-based restorative work. We are teaching people that can be, working within direct tree care, but also folks that are able to bridge gaps and connect other concepts in terms of program and that softer side of outreach and engagement, right? So this is a huge industry that we have had a hard time kind of getting people to be like, oh yeah, this is worth investing in because this matters to place and community. A lot of people hear arboriculture and they're like, we don't do that. Or they hear rainwater harvesting, they're like, we don't do that. And we really need a broader kind of industry approach to say, hey, actually, someone that's trained in rainwater harvesting practice and installation, and someone that's trained in ISA certified arboriculture strategies and techniques, that's someone we want, right? Because that's someone that knows how to do this well, whether it's related to energy, construction, or other things too. Another thing that we have found is, again, Sasha mentioned this too, kind of like the culture of current and past tree crews and landscape crews. I think personal care and community care is not always on the front of the mind of for-profit companies, and necessarily for crews. I would say that generally a job's a job for some landscaping crews, and there is not necessarily always that implication of care or intention. And so I think, an inclusiveness and equity to what a landscape practitioner can be and who that looks like is really important. We have a lot of folks, as Sasha mentioned, that bring their lived experiences working with their nana and tatas, working on their TO's landscaping crew, right? And they're not represented necessarily within kind of the dominant depiction of what a tree professional looks like. And so we are always still working on that. I know that this is a time where we're really, thinking about our language and like retracting conversations about diversity and inclusion. But it's still relevant as it's ever been. We need informed and diverse voices to make this work better, because we've kind of been in a homogenized, consistent rut of quality, and there's only one way out. Another thing is grant specifications and cash flow funding. You saw the various different alphabet scramble names that we had. Climate Equity Workforce Leadership, funded by the American Forest nonprofit. AAPP, Arizona Arboriculture Pre-Employment Program, funded by Arizona Tree Council and ADFFM. These are great opportunities to see this stuff. But the challenges we had were that this very much traditional hierarchical top-down money flow approach was our biggest issue. We had issues, money coming down from U.S. Forest Service to Arizona Tree Council to our Tucson Clean and Beautiful to our contractors. You can see the amount of steps it has to get from point A to point B. And ultimately, the biggest headaches we had were people not getting compensated timely or efficiently, right? And another thing that we found is that this is decentralized. I think a lot of people have been thinking about funding these kind of programs as these big tickets of like, oh, I can't invest $150,000 in a workforce program at my organization or in my institution. But funding is a thing that we can collectively look at. When we take this decentralized approach and collaborative approach to workforce development, we can think about the community and the places that we're investing in as the entities where we're putting this money, right? And I think that if we have a crew of 10 people that come through and they're connected to all of those individuals that we saw mapped out before, then every single one of those individuals, whether they're a county, a nonprofit, or a for-business company, is plugged into that network and then can generate opportunities and leverage relationships, right, collectively. And I think that that's the big piece, is when we see funding for this, I think that it's put in the context of one person putting forward a bulk sum to pay X amount of participants. And what I'm saying a challenge has been is exactly that. I think what we need to be looking at is how can we as a regional group or as municipal or county groups and those stakeholders that I mentioned, departments within municipalities, for-profit businesses that are being contracted by municipalities and counties, but also the nonprofits that are running other workforce education programs, right? How do we all collectively get that investment? I think it's by putting forward, X portion of that money from our budgets, that 10, 15K, so that we can see collectively the investment go into the people and then out into our networks. We don't need to keep looking at these traditional metrics of success if we're looking at the collective success of place and community.
Yes, and as always, our gaps and our challenges lead us into our aspirations and areas for improvement. And so this is kind of where we want to end, is the places we would like to take this. Obviously, as partnership and investment and building relationships and community has been such a core part of this program, we want to keep doing that. I think that these kinds of things take a lot of creativity and a lot of connection. And I think there's just so much potential, especially in the Tucson community, where there is a small group. I haven't been in this world in Tucson for that long, I'll say, and it's amazing to me how many people I already know who I care about, who care about me, who have helped prop me up in my career advancement, and that we can be doing that for each other. And so finding solutions for these kinds of strategies is very much possible, I think, especially in a city like Tucson, and I'm sure in other places in Arizona as well. I think another thing we'd just like to continue seeing is the capacity and the interest and the willingness to take on people who are coming out of these workforce programs. That's part of the way we can, show that we value these types of things and, are willing to go out on the limb to stand up for the things we're valuing as the potential hirers now in the world. Taking a chance on people who might be young and green in their knowledge and experience, but are really excited to, activate and integrate into this industry. I also think something we encounter over and over again as we're trying to teach best practices, we go out into the world and then we look at a bunch of trees that are lion-tailed and everybody in the program collectively cringes and we all are, sad for a few minutes. And so I think there's, the slow turning ship towards quality tree care standards. Trying to use the power that we do have as individuals and within our entities. And I just want to shout out, programs like Storm to Shade. I know we've been talking a lot about them, and I think they're doing a great job. I work for them as a contractor through Tucson Clean and Beautiful. And anytime one of our crews is out in the field and sees a tree that we say, I don't even know, there's something going on here weird, doesn't look healthy, it doesn't look like it's in the right place, etc., we can put in a work order to Storm to Shade, and that triggers them to call in a certified arborist to come and check it out and make a healthy assessment for what happens to that tree. And so I think it really is like seeing and attributing value to those living entities in our ecosystems too, and not having the first choice to be, somebody just hacking up the tree. And then I think, we've highlighted that, helping prop up people with increased gear and wraparound services to, providing money for the training that they are doing, for investing in themselves and ultimately investing in their communities as well. Helping to find the gear that people need to enter into these industries to help them be successful, and to find the other ways and services that they might need a little bit more of a step up to be able to access what some of us are more easily able to access for whatever reason. So those are all things we have a lot of hope around. I think that there's a lot of shared value in this room. And there's a lot of models out there that are, doing this in different capacities that we're still learning from. Like Angel said, we would love the opportunity to do this again and work with different collaborators and more collaborators and continue to have this grow to the point where ultimately the people who are graduating from this program are the employers for the next generation.
finally, just because we know that there's people that like numbers, we wanted to throw in just kind of a breakdown of budget. And just to give you an idea, the majority of this program comes to supporting participants. When you look at this block down here, contractual wages, administrators like Sasha and I fall very low on the actual chunk. The majority of the chunk is our participant stipends and our contractor instructor fees. You can see that instructors, all the people that we invited to come in and share their time and educate, were given a rate of $75 an hour. We were able to pay for their transportation and lodging if we needed to. Fortunately, we have a lot of homies in Tucson that just wanted to show up. This is a projection, and this is not what the exact cost was for the program. This is actually, I made a wishful thinking because we were only able to pay our participants $15 an hour to work full time. And so this is what it would look like if we were running 8 participants for that same 8-week program model with internship placements at $19 an hour per participant. And you can see like a little over 150K is really, when we think about the fact that that investment is going right into people, like Sasha said, and the folks that are going to continue bringing these practices forward, I just want to put it into perspective of investment. 8 minds and leaders cost way more than $150,000 in the long run. And if we can collectively agree for even just 3 years to look at what would it look like to fund several cohorts of this model, think about the numbers, the dozens of practitioners that would be unified around the same concepts. We talk about nonstop in Zoom meetings in the field, right? So again, it may seem like an investment. I hear a lot of conversations of like, how do we run a program like this? It's too expensive. It's like, we all benefit. So how can we all put our dollars from wherever we can into the hands and the minds of the people that we want to be carrying forward this work? And that's everyone at a job site, and they're really having a good time there too. But we are open to all questions, any inquiries for collaboration, and also like learn. We want to learn. We are so down to connect and chat about this, because the more and more we do this, the more convinced we are it can be decentralized. It really doesn't have to fall on one person. It falls on all of us. So we're really excited to talk about how to make that work.